Welcome to the Potter Buchanan Show. In this episode, we spoke with Cecilia George, Senior Recruitment Consultant for LMRE, coming to you live from the UK. Cecilia George, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you, Potter. How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the Potter Buchanan Show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were just talking about this. Originally, when I reached out, I was like, Cecilia can talk about like recruiting and what's happening in the job market. Like, obviously, like we're seeing tons of layoffs. You're not hiring as much on the tech space. It's more like manufacturing type jobs, correct?
Well, we work with tech companies, but that's
Yeah.
anything from like SaaS to robotics to hardware, software, and all of that kind of stuff. My like bread and butter is go to market hires. So anything in like sales, commercial, revenue generating and protecting. And then we have a tech team that deals with like those kinds of roles. But yeah, it's within tech, but it's not necessarily tech roles on my part of things.
Yeah. And originally, like had reached out to me about a role. So that's how like we had our first interaction. And then I was like, here's the basis of the show. It's more about people, right? I want to hear about the come up and then maybe discuss what you're doing in your profession. And I gave you a couple questions and you just came back to me with all this cool stuff about your life. And I was like, well, this is going to be better than I thought. I thought we just talked recruiting and stuff. So I want you to start like obviously with LMRE now, like end goal is recruiting, but I think the Wilshire house is really cool. And for people who don't know, I'm gonna show it real quick. For
Yeah, I
people,
thought you'd bring it up.
yeah, well, I think you kind of have to because otherwise, like
It's very
people,
British.
the Phillips house, you kind of grew up in
Yeah.
not really a castle, but what would you call that?
I would call it a country, a stately home.
Okay.
So it's a Georgian, I think it's Georgian, embarrassing if I get that wrong. It's a Georgian stately home that was owned by the Wyndhams, and it has everything from like servants' wings to like front rooms. It's got annexes and kind of everything about it. And my parents moved there in the mid 90s from London to run a wedding business.
Yeah.
And so while it looks like very glamorous on the outside, all of the like best rooms were very much saved for events, saved for like weddings, bridal suite, that kind of stuff and events. So while it looks very like showy, it was like a working house. And that was kind of how my parents earned their living. They had, such a successful company there, really kind of loved what they did. My dad took over the kind of kitchen and cooking side of things, and my mum was more on the like wedding setup, decoration, and kind of the eyes of it. But yeah, ran that very, very successfully. And it was a pleasure to grow up in. It was very cold. And kind
It
of
looks cold.
couldn't afford to keep the heating on because obviously when you use a heating system, like we had a boiler
Yeah.
in a boiler room. And so it was this entire room that just had this giant boiler that you could sit on. I could lie on the boiler. And I thought that was normal because I was like, oh yeah, that's just the boiler. But yeah, we had like 3 kitchens. It was wild, but very much a working house. It wasn't kind of all play, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I was reading that like there's rooms for like artists and different people to like kind of, I don't know, set up like a studio. Was that going on while you were there as well?
No, so when my parents got the house, it was like a shell. There was nothing, no curtains, no carpets. There was obviously the rooms that get shown to the public. So in the UK, if a house is a National Trust house, it will be open a couple of days of the week to the public, and that's where people can come and look around and be like, oh, this is where people lived like way back when, and still kind of set up like that. I'm sure you have similar things in the US. Apart from that, there was no curtains, no carpets, no beds, no nothing. And so my parents really did it up. And so we had the kind of business side of it. So that was the nice rooms where weddings would take place, and the rooms that people would stay in as part of like a hotel service, I guess, for those types of events. And then we had 2 flats, I believe, and 1 annex, and those were rented out to people. So the annex could have a small family, one of the flats could have a small family, and the other flat was kind of just a bit more than a studio. And so apart from that, we didn't really have anything for other people, but we did have those, rental spaces.
Okay. So were you how many people were living at the house besides like your family at a given time?
At a given time, maybe about an extra five to seven people,
Yeah.
and
As
then
a,
just your neighbors.
yeah. I picture as like a little kid just like skipping around this house. Would you like if you like were getting in trouble or something, could you just like hide somewhere and your parents like won't find you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one question people would always ask me is like, do you not get lost? And I was like, well, not really, because I've lived there my whole life. I know
Yeah.
most of the. There was one place I was very, very afraid of the cellar, and that was like a very dark, dingy, proper wine cellar with caverns and stuff like that. And we often had the local firefighting brigade come, and they would do like their exercises in our house of like navigating difficult environments. We had tri-services, so that was police, ambulance and fire, doing a mock plane crash on a train, and our house was used as like a base for them to bring all of these like amputees. You kind of got to see everything there, because it was not only weddings, it was shooting, like countryside pheasant shooting. It was corporate events, so we had like Saatchi and Saatchi. I actually went to my mum's yesterday, and she had a Saatchi and Saatchi pencil, and that event must have been maybe 20 years ago, and I was like, oh, that is such a throwback.
What is a Saatchi and Saatchi?
So Saatchi and Saatchi, I think, is like a marketing and PR company, but it's like a
Okay.
huge global company, and
Yeah.
that would be like a company retreat kind of thing that we'd host there.
It's really cool. So like your house always had something going on.
Yeah. Always. And growing up in that environment, I think you have the opportunity to be around people. And I was always around adults as a kid. My world revolved around adults. If I wanted to see my friends, it was as I grew up older, it was a walk down to the bus stop, which is maybe 15 minutes, then a half an hour bus into town, like the closest town, or my friends would have to drive me to a friend's house or whatnot. So I really didn't have like a lot around me in terms of kids growing up,
Yeah.
but I definitely had a lot of adults. And I think, that exposure definitely helped me in terms of like confidence. And being able to talk to literally anyone, that I think, and genetics. I think my mum and my grandma also just love striking up conversations with anyone, whether it's someone on a bus next to us or in a conference, for example. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's an advantage because you're kind of dealing with people on a different level if you're a kid talking to adults all the time. So you're
Hmm.
learning their stories, kind of what went into their backgrounds, and maybe able to apply some of that stuff as you go through life.
For sure.
Yeah. Um, so then you mentioned kind of like a downsizing of like the wedding business and stuff and eventually moved out of the house. How did that kind of come about?
That was my parents. It just became unsustainable for them
Yeah.
to continue with the wedding business. I think, as we've seen happen more increasingly, pressure with, rent and things like that had kind of changed their situation, and where they were at. So we ended up moving. We had 6 months to move out of the house, which, as you can imagine, with 26 bedrooms, 6 months is a short amount of time for anyone planning to make a move. And my mum would take all of these beds to our local, we call it the dump or the skip. I don't know what you'd call it in America, where you
The skip, I like that.
the skip, the household waste kind of place. And they were like, I'm really sorry, we don't take commercial waste. And my mum was like, no, this is from my house. And so we had 6 months to move, and we downsized into an 8 bedroom house, which I know doesn't sound small, but for us, that was like a shoebox.
Yeah.
And then from there, my parents kind of separated and still live very, very close to each other and maintain like a really, lovely contact. We all have big family Christmases together, just, very amicable split. But from there, went their separate ways into two smaller houses. So it's kind of kind of a slow downsize or gradual downsize.
Yeah. Well, that's a big shakeup as a kid. What age did you have to move out of the house?
I moved out at 15, so I was born into that house. So that was the first place that I was born. My siblings grew up in London and then made the move down there. And so I'd known that house my entire life. And it was sad leaving, but understandable circumstances. I think, what I probably missed the most was being able to have like house parties and stuff like that, because obviously we had the facilities for it, so it was great growing up.
Yeah.
But while my brother and sister got to see that through to their like 18th and beyond, mine very much stopped at my 16th birthday. So it was a bit of a shame. But yeah, I think that the parties I missed and probably the cold are two of the things I missed the most. Those winters were very, very brutal.
You missed the cold?
No, I didn't miss the cold. One thing I was I was happy to get rid of was the cold,
I would
because the
think.
winters were very brutal.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just like stone. So I think heating the house like that has just got to be difficult.
There's no double glazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, the costs associated were just like crazy. And so you'd wake up and see your breath in the morning. I mean, I still have to this day an electric blanket. I love my electric blanket. And it definitely keeps me going in the winter, but back then it was very much needed.
Yeah. We have good heating, and my wife's always has a heating pad at all times. So I don't, it's not like she grew up in the Phillips house, but you would kind of think with how cold she is on a constant basis. But um,
Yeah.
kind of getting into like your life and career, what came first? Did you go like army first? Like, this is what I'm gonna do, or what?
No, so that kind of dream came about. I moved schools for sixth form. So in terms of like my education, I did the entire British education system, from a state school, which is where state funded, to a grammar school, which is state funded but selective, so you have to pass an entrance exam. And then I went to my sixth form, which I guess is your high school, so 16 to 18-year-olds, and I went to a private boarding school, and they have all kinds of school trips and enrichment and whatnot there. And one of them was to Sandhurst, and I thought, great, a day off school, fantastic, let's sign up. And
Yeah,
we went there, and we were kind of taken around by all of these women who were just, it's really nice to actually talk about this today, because obviously International Women's Day was yesterday.
let's go.
And yeah, I was just led round by all of these women who were, so strong, so inspiring, so just kind of themselves, and really pressed on the benefits of what the army had given them. And I think it wasn't a career path I'd ever even considered, not that it's one that I went down, but definitely ended up seriously considering it, but as like a full-time option. But yeah, I just think they really kind of swayed me on what it gave them in terms of progression, in terms of confidence, in terms of like physical ability, and pushing yourself to the limit. And I think that was something at the time I hadn't considered, but really ended up looking up to. And so then I looked at like different routes into the army, and there was the thing that I actually joined, which I'll talk about in a minute. Went to university, I did French and Russian, and then there's something at the a university called UOTC. I think in America it's called ROTC.
Yep, we got that. That is accurate.
So yeah, so it's essentially, well, UOTC University Officer Training Corps. And it's basically like the Army's leadership training program for university students. So you're classed as a reservist, but you're doing kind of your degree alongside it. You train alongside it with the same framework that the Army uses for reservist officers. So you complete module A and B, and then if you wanted to go to and be like an official officer reservist, you'd go to Sandhurst and do your module C and D. So you kind of do half of the training required alongside your degree, but it involves one weeknight a week, and then one weekend a month. And the weekend a month is usually spent in the field, doing like field exercises, leadership development, military skills, all of that kind of fun stuff. Learning how to use a rifle, hanging out with your mates in a very different environment to the club. And so kind of took that up. I absolutely loved it. I've made some of my bestest friends through it. I'm going to one of their like wedding dress try-ons this month. So it really broadened my horizons, I guess, to the typical activities of what a student does. And then through that, I got given an opportunity to join a working regiment as kind of as an attachment, basically. And that was the Army's Information Activity and Outreach unit. I got, what did I get? A security clearance, a government security clearance. I was
Nice.
selected because I spoke Russian and I knew social media well. And it was just a really good opportunity to kind of, dip my toe in. But yeah, that was the kind of rationale behind that.
So you're fluent in Russian?
I wouldn't say fluent anymore. I
Okay.
can speak it very well. And if I speak to Russian people, they're always like, wow, your Russian's really good. And I'm like, it's nowhere near where it used to be.
Yeah. And that's what you studied in school along with the
French.
uh yeah.
Yeah. And that came about. I wanted to do French and Spanish at A level, which is our like high school diploma, I guess. And they couldn't timetable me for that, so they said you can do French or Spanish and Russian. And so I chose French and Russian, and that's kind of the reasoning and rationale behind that. But I loved it. I really had a good time at university, doing those languages. The year abroad that came with it is obviously a highlight, and all of that kind of good stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. What so doing the training and stuff, you get are you a good shot? Are you is it a markswoman or do you still say marksman? Is it a sexist thing? I don't know.
I think you still say marksman, but they actually, when I was there, they stopped calling a sewing kit a housewife, which definitely is a little bit of a sexist. But
Yeah.
I think they are getting phased out. And to answer that candidly, I'm not a good shot.
No.
I am at the moment trying to learn how to hunt and shoot deer with one of my family friends. So I try and go down and do that on a few weekends over the course of the year, just because I find that interesting and it's something different. And I think, as you can tell by what I've sent you, something different is something that I like.
Yeah. No, I think you're touching a lot of different spots. So like have you been out in the woods? Have you seen any bucks to shoot or
Yes, yeah, we went out in February, and we got a buck. I took home a lovely haunch. I seam boned it. I actually ended up giving myself and my partner really, really bad food poisoning because I didn't realize if you're going to serve it almost raw, you need to freeze it first. Oh, sorry. You need to freeze it first, and I served it almost raw. Didn't freeze it, and we both just were out for about a day.
yeah, I mean I wouldn't know how to cut so what was the term you used for cutting it up?
Seam boning.
Seam boning, okay. So you just whether you're giving instruction or would you like YouTube this?
Yeah, I just YouTubed it.
That's what's so weird about today's world. So you shoot it and then you're like, I'm gonna figure out how to do it and just did it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So what
It's
did you
quite
do?
easy though with a venison haunch because there are like lines of fat, and you essentially can just like cut across the lines of fat and basically pull the meat apart. It's
Okay.
not actually too technical, and there's a lot of like natural guide paths for you to follow when you're doing it.
All right. So not that complicated chopping up a deer if you have to do it. Except what did you do wrong that made it so you guys got sick?
So I think because I live a little bit away from the countryside, it was very fresh and hypothetically shouldn't have given me food poisoning. Obviously, transporting it from where it was shot to London out of a fridge, being wild, is, a breeding
Um,
ground for bacteria. And so I should have really frozen it and then cooked it, or just like cooked the hell out of it. I did neither. And so we ended up sick.
yeah. I've gotten venison a few times from my cousin who lives out in Vermont, and I'm always scared to cook it raw. And I like my steak like medium rare, but I don't know. I'm just like I should probably cook this more. I don't know if that's logical or not because it is frozen when he gives it to me. So I don't know.
I think just try and find out.
Yeah, I think that's the only method to go. So what's next for you? I know you sort of got into like a tech-ish job, right? And
Yeah.
then found your way to what you're doing now.
So I guess to close the army chapter, I had the best time doing it, and I feel like I learned so much while I was there. Perseverance, resilience, just being a good person. There are times when you're all tired, you're all sleep deprived, it's raining, and you've got to do a job, otherwise it won't get done. And people are relying on you, and you don't get a choice whether you have to do it or not. Um, and whether I was in the field on no sleep or in the office kind of side of things that I did, I really loved it. But I think after having gone on a year abroad, which I spent in Saint-Tropez, Paris, Ukraine and Georgia, I really loved the like autonomy of being able to choose where I was. And I just thought in the army you don't necessarily get that. Your weekends aren't your
Yeah.
weekends because you'll be told that you're on duty or something. And so I think that really pulled me away from that side of my career. I wanted to continue it as a reservist in London, but when I joined Alpha Sites, that wasn't really possible as the timings, I was working 10 hours plus a day, and the timings just didn't align to have something as kind of an extracurricular.
Yeah. What was the hardest thing you had to do in like the training or while in the field?
I think the hardest thing I had to do was probably train for something called Cambrian Patrol, which is, if anyone's in the military watching this, it's the world's most arduous, or isn't in the military, the world's most arduous patrolling challenge. So it's basically, I can't remember what it is exactly, but I think it's, many, many miles. You get 48 hours to do it, and you're carrying as a woman almost, over half your body weight. And that was training, every single weekend, going out, no sleep, recover. I ended up sustaining a hip injury, so, never actually competed as part of my team as a labral tear. And so I
Oh,
was, unwell, but, it's pushing your body to almost breaking point as seen by the injury. So I think that was probably the hardest thing I had to do. But, you can either do it miserable or you can do it with a smile on your face. And there's one that makes you upset and everyone around you upset. And there's one that makes you feel better and everyone around you feel better. And so I know which one I'd want to do.
nice. All right, so keep going with where you were at.
Yes. So into tech, I came back from my year abroad, was like, right, I need to get a job, and I didn't want to be, a grad that came out of university and was like, what now? I really, really wanted to have something lined up when I finished, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I, put my hat in the ring for a couple of jobs. I didn't manage to find anything, and then got outreached by a company called Alpha Sites, which is in the ELS world, so they're an expert network, and basically they love people with languages from like good universities, and it's quite a cutthroat cutthroat interview process, and cutthroat job ultimately. It's very pressured in terms of like targets, performance, and stuff like that. So I can get onto that. But I interviewed with them in November. I think I did about 3 interviews and I passed. And I had my start date for September, and I was like, brilliant. I don't even need to think about this.
Yeah.
Then kind of summer rolled over, I pushed that forward or back, I never know how to explain it, to July. So I ended up having literally a week off university where I went to Mallorca, got back from Mallorca, and then went into my first job the next day. And so I really just kind of, I'm ambitious. I wanted to get started as soon as I could. And I think, by having that first job, and I think I stayed there, almost 3 years, 2 years, 8 months, I think it says on my LinkedIn. And I managed to join and give that a really good crack. And I joined there. There's 4 verticals, I think. So there's corporate, private equity, capital markets, and consulting. And I worked with the corporates, which is the smallest smallest company. And I started working with the like financial services, so like the Willis Towers Watson, those kinds of corporates. And then just kind of, I wasn't seeing success. I wasn't able to hit my targets. I just wasn't doing very well. And it was a time when I had joined that there was a bit of a mass exodus in terms of like firing. So the vibe was a little bit scary
Yeah.
in the office, combined with having just joined, not performing very well. And I think it kind of hit a crack between my manager and me that was like, either I will have to leave or I can try another manager and see if I see success. And it really, just shows different working styles. I went from 1 month really coming in almost under my target by about half to exceeding it the next. And I think it just rebuilt a lot of confidence in me, because obviously being a grad, you're like nervous, then you've got people getting fired or having to leave the company around you. That's like your stability, and then you're not doing very well, so you kind of lose a lot of confidence. And it took me a while to build that back up, but I had a fantastic manager in my new team, which was working with tech and industrial clients, which is where my interest comes in. And so that's like the Schneider Electrics, the Siemens, the Maersk,
Yeah.
and then Reuters, for example. So more on the tech side, or Walters Kluwer. And so I really kind of like moved into that, really enjoyed it. I loved working, with the people that I did. I loved my team, and I just saw a lot of success there. I was hitting targets, I was making good money. Then pivoted into another team, which was more strategic. And so I built out a whole like new skill set. But ultimately, the targets were just quite unrealistic in terms of being able to hit them. And I feel in recruitment, I speak with people the whole time who are like, yeah, it's not that I can't it's not that I wouldn't be able to hit my targets, but they're just so far out of reach, you know. They kind of almost doubled overnight, with no way to get new clients. So I developed a new RFP strategy because we would never win new business. We'd always lose out to like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd spend like 2 days filling in. It's almost like a consulting project. And I'd fill in these RFPs to like win the bids. And I'd come back and be like, yeah, you were bottom of our vendor list. And I was like, not again. And so I spoke with everyone that I'd spoken to, and I was like, look, why did we lose? And, you know, I went back to my director and I said, look, we need to pitch ourselves less as alpha sites. We need to look at what Bain, BCG, and McKinsey are doing, because if we're pitching ourselves as ENS, we're never going to win consulting contracts. And so then managed to turn that around. I had, you know, Volvo and Siemens lined up to sign. I think there was an issue with Meta and the legal terms, but again, I'd won 3 bids successfully off the back of that. And even with that new business, it still wasn't enough to kind of conjure up anything close to what my target would have been. So eventually kind of like decided to take a little bit of a career pivot and move into something else.
Do you think it was set up like that? Because a lot of companies you see like that, especially in sales, where it's just burn and churn. Like some sales jobs you're not really meant to do for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds kind of like it was like that. Like if they can hit the target, great. They might burn out, but then someone will come in and sort of have the vigor again. Like I don't know. I see that a lot when different jobs that people take, where like 1 to 2 years is kind of like the max that they'll hang around.
I think with alpha sites, it's a very different story with the people that join versus the people in the segment where I ended up, which was just a team of 5 of us globally. So it was very, very
Yeah.
small. Whereas the actual body of associates at alpha sites is so big. And I think with them, yeah, there's an element of kind of burn and churn, the almost like grad factory, if that makes sense. And I'm not, you know, singling them out. I think a lot of companies do it and it's part of their strategy. If you can get, you know, cheap labor, for example, someone that's just come out of university, and I know that grads are crying out for jobs at the moment in London especially. And then add on to the fact that they offered visas, which not many companies do. So a lot of people ended up having to stay because of a visa. So that was a really tough environment. I think, you know, it teaches you a lot. It teaches
Yeah.
you excellent time management. You know, I was always picked up on every tiny mistake I made, which was very frustrating to begin with, but it's actually made me a much stronger professional through kind of sticking it out. And then in terms of the targets, moving to the other side, I think it was just it was a team of 1 that became a team of 2. And, you know, we, instead of being set, you know, 50% of 150%, so 75% each, we were both set 150% as our target. And, you know, that was just unachievable for, you know, both myself and my manager. And it just led to kind of ultimately the collapse of the service. I don't think it exists in the same sphere as it did when I left, just because people didn't feel like they were able to hit and really succeed. So
Yeah.
kind of saw other things.
Yeah. So then you moved to kind of Gartner after that.
I moved to Ghana and I looked for a long time, and I think I was quite taken aback, whereas it had taken me 3 interviews to get my first job out of uni as a grad. No, 3 companies, sorry. I went through almost 14 final round rejections before I found Ghana, and it was tough because I'd never had that. And, you know, most people find it the opposite. You know, as a grad, you go through so many, it's a numbers game. You hear of these like 100, 150 jobs applied to, and it's only getting worse at the moment. I mean, the London job market is horrific in
Yeah.
terms of, it's very much a buyer's market, and employers get their choice of who they'd like to hire. And definitely found that at the beginning of 2025. I was, you know, searching and then managed to get a job with Gartner. And I think at that point, you know, I was very tired from my job search. I wasn't able to step into that role with the, you know, vigor that I had hoped. And it's not to say that I did, you know, badly or was forced out. I really loved it, but I'd moved from 10-hour plus days, hyper fast, like everything moving, you know, the whole time, to a lot slower company. They get stuff done. They're an amazing company. They are so accommodating in terms of like work-life balance. I had an excellent manager, but I just felt that, I needed to move back into something that was a bit more high pressure, a bit more constantly moving, because that extra time combined with like how I was feeling didn't really lend very well in terms of me feeling my best self. And then add to the fact it was mostly work from home,
Yeah.
which I didn't enjoy. I love a hybrid model. I think it's, really good for being able to get your
Yeah.
washing done, do a food shop during the week, and then, go into the office and really be present and be there when you're there, rather than having to worry about like, oh, I've got a million different things to do at home. And so that's when I kind of sought out something else. LMRE crossed my desk. It was actually from an Instagram post that my aunt sent me. I thought, you know what, I'll give this a go. Went to the interview and, I really got bought into the idea of what they're doing there, who they are as a company, what they encourage their employees to be doing. And I think it was sad to say goodbye to Gartner, but I was very excited to be in something that was like moving a little bit faster and had that, human touch that was something that I had missed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what's weird with the job market the way it is, like recruitment is a good place to be because everybody needs jobs. It's probably bad to be on the other end. It's probably good to be sitting where you are because there's no lack of like people to reach out to. I mean, I guess the jobs to fill, you'd probably wish you had more, but what are you seeing in the market right now? Like, how do people stand out and kind of what's your take on everything?
I think in terms of, addressing the first point of being in the right places, a lot of companies are scaling back budgets at the moment,
Yeah,
and recruiting isn't always a budget. It's an expensive service, and companies aren't always bought in, and you're competing with loads of different other agencies for the
yeah,
same jobs. And while finding candidates is great, and there are loads of candidates, I think I'm often seeing a big mismatch in terms of clients' expectations and what there is on the market. And to put it neatly in a phrase that I say all the time is I can get a client a Ford and I can get them a Ferrari. What I can't get them is a Ferrari at a affordable price. And so I think, they want these candidates with all the bells and whistles, having done, 5 years experience selling into, X persona at Y company with, never having missed quota. They want them to do 4 days in office, which in a hybrid world now is quite a tough ask, or full time in office. And then, 50% travel on top of that, and well tenured. I've had a client who's been like, if they've not been at any company in their career for less than 4 years, we probably wouldn't hire them. I'm just thinking, wow. And then they want that for like quite a low budget. So I think, the biggest challenge is meeting client expectations. You can find someone really great, but ultimately if they're coming at a higher premium, which, they command because of what they've done, that's challenging, I think. And then going on to your second point is like how people can really stand out in that environment. I think it's not necessarily not I guess it's knowing a lot, and that knowing and doing a lot, and that comes under knowing a lot about the industry that you're operating in. So really embedding yourself in the whole value chain, understanding what's going on around you, and becoming, almost a thought leader in a space that you operate in or want to operate in. If you're going for a job, I don't know, for a contact company, for example, but you don't know the faintest about contact or the value chain or the verticals or what goes into it, who you'd be selling into, but you just think, oh, it's SaaS, I'd be able to do it. You're
yeah,
never going to get that job because you're never going to be able to compete with someone. And I think one thing is really positioning yourself not only as a salesperson, but a salesperson in X industry. And that can change if you want to change industry, but you've got to do the hard graft and learn around it. And I think that that's one thing that I really try and impress on people. I run the logistics and warehouse tech vertical at LMRE, so that's actually more my focus than contact. But again, I'm constantly posting updates about what's going on in this space, because if people look at my LinkedIn, they don't just think, oh, well, she's a recruiter. They can see that I'm a specialist recruiter. They can see blog posts that I've
yeah.
done on my blog, The Dispatch, and they can see that actually she knows what she's talking about. She's not just kind of sugarcoating and sitting behind a message being like, I'm a warehouse and logistics recruitment specialist. It's like, oh, actually, she knows what she's doing. So, we attend industry conferences. I'm going to Modex, for example. So really trying to broaden your horizons around that and speak with leaders in the space to kind of build and boost your knowledge. And I think on the doing side of things, it's, really doing more in terms of what you offer at work. So I'm a recruiter, but I've also changed a lot of the systems that we work with. LMRE, I've introduced things like Slack integrations and stuff like that. So in terms of my day to day, I'm not just a recruiter. In terms of my function and what I do, I actually bring the business so much more value in other avenues alongside like revenue generation, for example. And I think those always go a long way because it shows that you're a team player, and especially if you're trying to appeal to a startup, for example, it's that notion of wearing many hats and coming with examples of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point because you're making yourself more valuable than someone who's just doing the recruiting piece. Also, kudos answering my two-part question that I didn't even phrase as a two-part question. The fact you listened to that and were able to answer both is very impressive. My questions tend to run on sometimes,
It's
and
fine.
you parsed both out and were able to answer both, which was excellent. And I think that's very true because obviously I was on the job market. That's how I know you. And I'm just like, it's fucking SaaS, I can sell it. But like you need to know what you're talking about in a given
Mm.
industry. And I think that's more and more important. I actually completely switched industries. So I'm like trying to get as much knowledge as I can as I sell. So yeah, I think if so, would you recommend, say someone's trying to get warehouse logistics, like take a course in this if you were selling cloud or some sort of other technology to at least show that you have at least some willingness to like put your put some stake in the game, I guess.
So I think not necessarily understanding the cloud, but I think understanding the warehouse and logistics ecosystem is it's all so interconnected these days in terms of the inventory management software and how that relates to the robots that are perhaps doing the picking, and how that relates to what's being sold, what packages are being needed, what weights they are, how that fits on a truck. And it's a whole living, breathing ecosystem that is more complex, with loads of systems that really rely on each other. So I think it's not just understanding the company you want to go into, but how that relates to the companies around that. And how I would do that is understanding what different parts there are. So whether it is AMRs, autonomous mobile robots, inventory management softwares, 3PLs, for example, understanding how they all fit and interact with each other. And then listening to podcasts. I know Kevin Lawton has a really good podcast called the New Warehouse podcast, which I listen to a lot. He's recently actually just done his 750th episode.
Wow. On
So
warehousing?
on warehousing, yeah, and warehouse tax. There are people out there. And then another one I would say, and this is something I've recently done, is tailor your LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become my Instagram for all things warehouse and logistics. I scroll on there and I don't get random tech founders being like, I just found 100 million in Bitcoin, and all of that kind of stuff coming up on my feed. I get, the newest, the latest and greatest in warehousing, what different companies are doing. So I've really managed to curate my feed as something that will just free flow knowledge to myself. And it's actually been amazing. And I've found out way more from doing that than I would have done if I hadn't have. And that has been a really great thing for me, at least.
Yeah, you're getting a feedback loop of what you need to see every
Exactly.
day to like educate yourself. Yeah. Whereas like I think my feed's just kind of a mess right now. So I think that was great information for people looking, and specifically if they're going to end up talking to you or just like any industry specific, try to drill down, find information that's relevant before you talk to the people and get as much information as you can.
Because I also think in terms of sales, whatever you're using, Challenger, Medpick, Medic, Bant, Sandler, whatever, it's all about uncovering pain points and where someone is going wrong. And I feel like as a seller, especially go to market roles is what I mostly do, is uncovering those pain points is only going to be made easier when you know what those pain points could be.
Yeah.
And by understanding the industry that you're operating in or selling into, the end customers, what they want. What does a Walmart want in their warehousing versus a Nike, for example? They're going to be very different things. You've got a whole element of cold chain logistics surrounding, health and food safety. That's the one. And so, there are very different things. So yeah, really understanding, not only the environment, but also the end customer. And I think when you go into an interview and you can really impress, the interviewer will come out and be like, damn, this person knows their stuff. And I
Yeah.
could put them in front of a client, I could put them in front of, a potential prospect, and really trust that they'll be able to utilize that knowledge and really make a difference from the get-go. So I think in terms of differentiating yourself, that is just like the key piece.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your like metrics? Like how many people are you looking to get like onboarded per month or
So it really depends how many roles you're working on and your recruitment style. So I try and ear away from like a spray and pray, if that makes sense.
yeah.
If we're talking about candidates, I really like to, find someone that is going to be the exact fit for what my client wants and go after them. So an example I've used, and that was a really, really successful hire. They're both absolutely loving each other, the hiring manager and the candidate. Is I found this guy that was a contact marketing specialist in Canada and Vancouver, and all of the marketing people I found were, not very construction, not very like techie. It was more just like health and wellness brands. But I found this one guy and I'd sent him a couple of messages and I got no response, but he had open to work, which was, as me trying to find him, was really frustrating. I was like, why are you not responding to me?
Yeah.
So we called up his old workplace and I was like, hi, does anyone know so and so? If you do, I know you can't give me his details, but if you could just send him a message to let him know that I reached out to him on LinkedIn, that would be fantastic. And I think I sent that client about 3 candidates and that one candidate got the role, if that makes sense, just because I knew he'd be absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And so it really depends. If you can find someone like absolutely to your client's specifications to a T and you can go after them, it could be literally a one and done. But then other times, I've been working on an account executive role and I've sent them 36 people and I've still not filled the role because their requirements are so specific. And so I think it really depends on, how willing your client is to bend and listen to you. And then also what's available on the market and, what you can find within their price range. Because you might find someone that ticks every single box, but they come in at 20 to 50K more than they're anticipating paying. I still like to send those over to my clients to be like, it's not that I'm not looking for it's not that I'm looking for the wrong people. It's that the right people are just out of budget.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
it
sure.
really depends on, what their specifications are, how quickly you can find the right person and whether they're engaged. So yeah.
Well, sending them people even outside of their budget, it shows like, hey, maybe it's you, not me, and you're doing your due diligence on like who to bring in.
Yeah.
But that's a great story of like you, I mean, you're selling every day too. You had to call this guy and have or call their company to get him to even talk to you.
Yeah.
But you realized he was the perfect fit for the role. So at least you have a good eye for what's going on and what people are looking for.
Exactly. And then I think on the client side, it's, really just knowing who's hiring, knowing who uses recruiters as well, because not every company is going to use recruiters. And, it can be 10 times more helpful if someone responds to a BD message and just says, hey, Cecilia, thanks for reaching out. We actually don't use external recruiters. We fill all of our roles in-house. And I'm like, great, well, that's knocked this company off for me, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So I can then stop bugging them and focus my efforts on people that do and people that would actually want and relish my help. And so, just a simple message just to say, hey, not interested. And then also for whatever reason, and that goes the same with with a role, is really useful. If you're not interested in something, give a reason why. Because, say I send you a role and it's like, you're not interested, and I say they've got a budget of 150 and you just put not interested. I always like to ask why, because is it that you're not interested because you want a remote role? Is it that you're not interested because the salary is way too low? Is it that you're not interested because you are looking for a role in a different industry? Great. If it's that you want a better salary, I actually have another role for you that could be relevant. If it's that you want remote, let me ask the client and see if they can be flexible. If I think you're a really good fit, I can try and get the client to do some workarounds to make that happen.
Yeah.
So there are a few times where I've had, pushback from candidates and they've actually got quite far in the screening process and really wanted that job at the end of it. But just giving that reason why, so that I can provide, a bit of extra color, a bit of reasoning behind it, whether that's in sales. And so if someone comes to me and I say, I find myself thinking, no, thank you. I'll always try and give a reason as to why, because it helps them. Or like, again, if you're providing a market update to a client, you can say, I've heard back from 7 people. Those 7 people, 4 of them were not interested because the salary is too low, and 3 of them don't want to do 4 days in office. It gives them that reason, and it gives them that, sorry, the reasons as to why you're perhaps getting so much rebuttal and what they can do to adjust their expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. So just doing your due diligence and making sure. So tell me, like moving off of like recruiting, tell me a little bit about the personal chefing.
Personal chefing, God, I shouldn't have said that. I food poisoned myself and my partner.
Oh, you
I
did. That was a
honestly,
bad advertisement for that.
I promise you, I've never poisoned a client. When I
Don't
moved
eat
to
deer. If Cecilia brings over deer, just don't eat it. Just request something different.
no venison given to my clients.
Yeah.
No, they actually normally buy all of the food. It will be in a cardo shop that they'll just send to them. That really started. I was at Gartner. I had, so many extra hours in my day. I worked mostly with the Middle East. And so I could adjust my hours from like 7 till 3 or 3:30. I can't remember exactly what it was. And so I decided to use something to, really kind of develop a side hustle, and do something different. I think, I'm Gen Z. This, despite being called the like lazy generation or that we do nothing, I actually think that more of us or most of us have side hustles or something that we're working towards outside of our job. And I don't think we see that as our like necessarily our main thing. It's something that we do between the hours of 9 till 5. But outside of that, I think, a lot of us try and be a lot more, at least I do. And so that was why I started private chefing, because loved cooking. I find it really relaxing, and I had struggled to get a salary increase for a while. And so I was like, if I can't get that from a corporate, then I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I'm going to use
Yeah.
what I can. I'm going to use my extra hours, and I'm going to do that. So I started, getting clients on an app. I had my first client. It was actually an awful experience. I didn't enjoy it. They sat in the kitchen for about 3 hours and watched me, which was quite not traumatic, but it was quite just like, oh,
It's
let me
awkward.
cook.
Yeah.
And then found some really lovely families, who kind of just did batch meal prep, and then it kind of snowballed into like events and stuff like that. And I still do it, just a lot less, because I don't have necessarily the time with recruiting, especially now that I work with US again. It's, a lot of
Yeah.
evenings, and things like that. Yeah, I wanted to do something more. I was struggling to find something more out of my career. And so really just tried to push what I could do within my means and make an outcome better for myself.
Yeah. I think side hustle culture was probably propagated by the fact that nobody makes enough money in their actual job. So I don't
Yeah.
know who was pushing the agenda, but it probably wasn't Gen Z's fault. It was probably some like government thing where they're like, let's talk about side hustles. Nobody can like afford life anymore. But that's cool. What is so you come over, what's your top dish that you'd be serving?
I love to make fresh pasta.
Yeah.
It's quite basic, but I love a fresh pasta with like a like slow braised ragu, for example. I did a beef short rib and polenta for New Year's for all of my friends, which was really delicious. My favorite dessert to make, and one that I think is like a big showstopper, is my salted caramel cremo, which is, I don't even know how to explain it. It's a cremo
Yeah.
but with miso and salted caramel, and it's delicious. And I do that with like a sablé and a homemade ginger ice cream, and that is really delicious. But I like experimenting. I live quite close to Billingsgate Market, which, if for anyone that is in the US, which I presume is most of your watchers, that is London's oldest fish market. And you've got to go
Okay.
at like 4 a.m. and you just get fish that has just come straight in from the coast.
That's beautiful.
That's always quite a fun one. But yeah, I really like to make anything, and I like to throw my hat in the ring and try anything. The worst I can do is fail. But
Yeah.
if I'm cooking for clients, it's usually something that I know how to do quite well. One thing I make really, really well if I'm meal prepping, and kids love this because a lot of it has been young families, is fish pie, which is a very British dish. And that is
Sounds
basically a mixture of like salmon, pollock, cod, and sometimes prawns. in mine because I'm fancy, in like a lovely white creamy sauce, with parsley, lemon, and then topped with mashed potato and put in the oven. But it's really good. If anyone's
That
watching
sounds
looking
good.
for some British inspiration, comfort food in the autumn, try fish pie. It's really delicious.
Yeah, I feel like Americans often make fun of British cuisine, but it could just be the naming conventions that need to be updated, and then I think people might change their mind. That sounds good though. I think my kids would they're 3 and 1, about to be 4 and 2, so they don't eat anything. Like if you cook them anything with any protein in it or that's good for you at all, it's yuck right away.
I try and make everything from scratch. That is one thing that I do, whether that's bread, wraps, chicken marinade, mayonnaise. I try and do everything homemade, and that's kind of my mantra, or like my niche, I guess, within private chefing is when I cook for someone, it is all traced back to one single ingredient, so there's never any shortcuts involved.
Do you, well, that's what I need to get in on. That's my vision, right? Because you look at like products in our pantry and it's just like, what is half of this stuff? Like
I would
it's,
highly recommend Ultra Processed People by Chris Van Tullochen. It is the most eye-opening book to the world of manufactured nutrition, and it's honestly incredible.
I mean, yeah, I've never read that. Maybe I'll put it on the list. I'm reading Good Energy right now, which is basically about like your whole metabolic system and how it works and everything you put into it. I'm very aware of like how bad that is. One thing, and I might do a deep dive on this, is natural flavor. That is in every single US product. But natural flavor in itself doesn't mean anything. And this is one of the few things I learned in marketing in college is natural is just occurring in nature. This laptop is natural. So it has nothing to do with it being good for you. And they use that in everything. So like what is that?
I
You
don't know,
know,
we don't have it in the UK.
I know you
I
guys have
think
like real food.
we have, well, I don't think we're as good as Europe though.
Okay.
I think Europe have a lot better food than us. Definitely, their supermarkets are a lot fresher. Um, but yeah, I know when I went to the States, I found it, challenging to do
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, if you're trying to cook like the single ingredient meals, like definitely. I mean, you could put it together at a grocery store, but you even have to be careful with some of that stuff. Like we got pickles yesterday. Pickles had natural flavor. Was the pickle not enough? What else did you have to put in there? So keep a heads up for that. I'm gonna do a deep dive on whatever this is and get to the bottom of it. But is there anything else you wanted to touch on? I mean, it's a story about you, so I don't know if I missed anything from what you sent over, but
Not really. I guess the one other thing is the book that I'm writing, and I got a response from an agent recently, so I'm quite excited about
let's
that. I
go.
have not finished it. 29,000 words into a book about being a young person on a grad scheme in London, loosely based off my own experience and kind of the different pressures of, assimilating, joining something that is so unnatural, I guess, where you're kind of forced to leave your personality at the door.
Yeah,
It's kind of how I felt for a lot of it. And then also, I guess, just being a woman in today's world with, contending with social media, the pressures, things that are constantly coming in from Botox to Ozempic, and, how that really changes the way in which you view yourself against like conventional beauty standards that are just moving so far to so far away from what is natural and what is human. There's the whole thing about the Instagram face, so I think it touches on a lot of different things, a lot of challenges that people are facing in the UK. I mean, our student loans, we have 9% taken out of our salary over £38,000. We spend 9% of that to go to pay back our student loans, so, and they're growing above inflation as well. So there's a lot of pressures coming from being a grad to moving into the working world, navigating, your student loan, your first job, moving out, living in London, balancing your time, keeping fit, being a woman, and all of those kinds of different things. So yeah, it touches on everything, as well as like class dynamics in, organizations that potentially lean more one way than another. That's kind of what I've been up to, I guess, outside of everything else.
I mean, that's a talk about side hustles. Is it like nonfiction but based on your experience?
It's based on my experience. If you knew everything I did, you could probably pick up that I had written it.
Yeah.
But if you had never known me or met me, you would not know that it was me, what it was actually like, the company that it was, based in. I've done it off one of the big four, so like EY, PwC, for example. Trying to kind of like change it and make it a bit more generic so that, people can see it or read it and I guess relate. And they are known for their grad schemes. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. And I love it. I'm not finished. I'm about the third of the way through, so gotta just get back to my keyboard and keep pressing on with that one.
So you're 29,000
Words,
words in
yeah.
and you're a third of the way through,
Yeah.
but you have interest like publisher wise?
So I got a response recommending me to from an agent recommending me to one of her colleagues. That's not a
Yeah.
problem. I feel like she wouldn't have made that recommendation if she didn't actually think that it would be a good fit for her colleagues. We'll see. The only thing I'm nervous about is normally you should only submit it once it's fully written. So, hey, I'm sure people have done that before.
Yeah, no, I think if I mean, you have enough content there. I think somebody would be able to pick up if there's something here or not, right? With that
Yeah,
amount done. So, yeah, put
yeah,
yourself out there. It's worth the shot.
exactly. You miss every shot you don't take, to be cliche.
Yeah, 100%. And like the growing up, like I'm a little, how old? You shouldn't ask a woman this,
No,
but how
you
old
can ask. I am 25, turning 26 this year.
Okay, so you grew up like I'm 37. You grew up like phone in hand, like Instagram, like
Not
all.
necessarily. I got Instagram when I was
Because you
about 13.
Okay, 13. That's still though like I
Yeah,
forget.
yeah, for sure.
There's a great book that I listened to like on this whole subject and how like social media, especially for women, is so particularly damaging. Like it's just like
It's terrible.
it can't be like overstated. So I think that topic is super relevant and like now with TikTok and everything, it's probably even worse. But it's just I don't know. I think that's a great thing for people to read about and especially like kind of how it affected you or your fictional character.
Exactly, yeah. She's not called Cecilia. Fun fact. I think that would be
Okay.
close for home.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, Cecilia, I really appreciate it.
Like,
It was a great conversation. I love learning more about your story. And we'll have this out in a couple weeks and you'll be able to see the full thing. YouTube, Spotify, Potter Buchanan Show.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I feel very honoured to have been invited. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all of the things that you do well because I think you're an amazing host.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All
Have
right.
a
I'll
wonderful
talk to you.
day.
All right.